My own mother leaned in close, her eyes filled with cold embarrassment as she whispered, "Please, hide that uniform. Don't ruin your brother's big day with your military nonsense." My father nodded in agreement, handing me a plain garment bag and telling me to change in the bathroom before the ceremony started. They thought my service was an eyesore, a distraction from my brother's lavish $100,000 wedding. But I refused to hide who I was or the sacrifices I'd made. When I stepped into that ballroom wearing my Marine Corps dress blues, a heavy, uncomfortable silence fell over 150 wealthy guests. My parents were about to scream, until 12 high-profile, distinguished veterans slowly stood up from their tables, came to attention, and rendered a crisp salute. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Claire Vance, and at 27 years old, I've learned that the hardest battles aren't always fought on foreign soil. Sometimes they take place right at your family's dinner table. Growing up, my older brother, Brandon, was the unquestioned golden child. He was charming, ambitious, and destined for corporate greatness, a vision my parents happily bankrolled through elite private schools and a cushy Ivy League education. Whatever Brandon wanted, Brandon got. I, on the other hand, was the forgotten daughter. I didn't fit into my parents' vision of high society success. Wanting to carve my own path, I put myself through college on an ROTC scholarship and earned my commission in the United States Marine Corps. While Brandon was climbing the corporate ladder in tailored suits, I was leading troops, sleeping in dirt, and deploying overseas. My parents viewed my service not with pride, but as a bizarre, unrefined phase I'd eventually grow out of. When I finally returned home from a grueling 10-month deployment, exhausted and carrying invisible scars, there was no welcome home banner or tearful reunion. My parents barely acknowledged my return. All they could talk about was Brandon's upcoming wedding, a lavish, $100,000 affair meant to merge our family with the city's most prominent elite. I was expected to play the quiet, dutiful sister, but I quickly realized I wasn't being welcomed back as a daughter. I was treated as an inconvenient afterthought that needed to be managed. The evening of the rehearsal dinner, the illusion of family warmth completely shattered. My mother pulled me into a quiet hallway away from the other guests, her face tight with a tension I knew all too well. My father stepped up beside her, his arms crossed, adopting the stern posture he usually reserved for misbehaved children. "Claire, we need to discuss your attire for tomorrow," my mother began, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She didn't ask how I was adjusting after my deployment. She didn't ask about my life. Instead, she produced a thin, plain garment bag from behind her back and held it out like a peace offering. "We bought this dress for you. It's simple, neutral, and won't draw attention." I stared at the bag, then at my parents. "I brought my Marine Corps dress blues," I said quietly, keeping my tone measured. "It's standard protocol for formal family events, and I'm proud to wear it." My father let out an irritated sigh. "Claire, be realistic for once. This is a high society event. The bride's family comes from old money, and having a daughter strutting around in military gear is unrefined. It looks aggressive. We want an elegant, traditional wedding, not a military parade." Unrefined. The word burned in my throat. I'm a captain in the United States Marines, Dad. I didn't spend the last 10 months in a war zone just to be hidden away like an embarrassment. "You are not the center of attention tomorrow. Brandon is," my mother snapped, shoving the garment bag into my hands. "Wear the dress, hide the uniform, and don't ruin your brother's big day with your military nonsense." Back in my childhood bedroom, I laid the garment bag on the bed and stepped over to my closet. Hanging there, protected in thick plastic, were my Marine Corps dress blues. The midnight blue fabric was crisp, the gold buttons polished to a mirror shine. But my eyes immediately locked onto the small, distinctive ribbon pinned above my left pocket, the Silver Star. It was awarded to me for leading a squad through heavy enemy fire to pull 3 wounded Marines out of an ambushed convoy overseas. It was the worst day of my life, a day carved into my memory with smoke and noise, yet it was also the day I proved what I was made of. When I'd received the medal, my parents hadn't even come to the ceremony. They'd sent a quick text message congratulating me, then immediately asked if I'd be home in time for Brandon's birthday dinner. I looked back at the cheap, beige dress my mother had handed me. Wearing it wasn't just about conforming to their dress code. It was about shrinking myself to make them comfortable. It was about pretending that my sacrifices, my courage, and my brothers and sisters in arms didn't matter. I took a deep breath, reaching out to stroke the stiff collar of my tunic. I realized then that no matter how much I bent over backward, I would never earn my parents' approval. I didn't need to hide who I was anymore. Tomorrow, I would walk into that venue with my chin up. The double doors of the country club's grand ballroom swung open, and I stepped into the lion's den. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and high-end perfume. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm light over a sea of tailored tuxedos and designer gowns. 150 guests from the city's highest social circles, all laughing and clinking champagne flutes. The moment my heels struck the polished hardwood, the ambient chatter began to die down. The shift was immediate. People turned, eyes widening as they took in my tailored Marine Corps dress blues. The stark dark fabric, the gleaming brass buttons, and the sharp lines of my uniform stood out sharply against the pastel decorations. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a rising tide. Across the room, I spotted my parents standing near the head table with the bride's family. My mother's glass froze halfway to her lips. Her face drained of color, turning from polite warmth to sheer, unadulterated fury in a matter of seconds. Beside her, my father's jaw set into a hard line. Before I could take 10 steps into the room, my father broke away from the group and began marching toward me, his strides fast and purposeful. He looked around nervously, trying to gauge how many influential eyes were watching as he closed the distance. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed, grabbing my upper arm with enough force to wrinkle my sleeve, his voice trembling with embarrassment. "We gave you a dress. You are going to step back through those doors right now, or so help me, you are leaving this wedding for good." My father had his hand on my arm, preparing to push me toward the exit, when a sharp, authoritative voice cut through the silent room like a thunderclap. "Hold on a minute." The entire ballroom turned to look at the head table. Standing up slowly was an elderly gentleman in an immaculate tuxedo. It was General Arthur Pendleton, a highly decorated retired Marine Corps Major General and the bride's grandfather. He walked with a slight limp, but his presence was commanding, freezing everyone in their tracks. My father's grip on my arm loosened instantly. General Pendleton adjusted his posture, his keen eyes locking onto the left side of my chest. He blinked once, twice, as if confirming what he was seeing. Then, his voice boomed across the ballroom, thick with reverent awe. "Silver star in the room." Before my parents could comprehend what was happening, General Pendleton pushed back his chair, came to attention, and brought his right hand up into a crisp, sharp salute directly toward me. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. Across the room, 11 other men, CEOs, judges, and high-ranking community leaders who were also veterans, stood up from their tables. In unison, they clicked their heels, faced me, and rendered sharp salutes. My father stood frozen beside me, his mouth slightly open. My mother looked back and forth between the high society guests and me, completely bewildered. "Captain," General Pendleton said, his voice echoing in the dead quiet of the room. "It is an absolute honor to stand in the presence of someone who wears that medal. Welcome." Suddenly, the silence broke. The rest of the 150 guests, taking their cue from the general, erupted into loud, sustained applause, completely turning the tide of respect toward me. General Pendleton walked over, extending a hand to shake mine with genuine warmth, completely ignoring my father, who was still hovering in stunned silence. "Captain Vance," the general said, his eyes scanning my uniform again. "I read about your unit's heroic stand in the valley last year. Saving 3 men under heavy fire. That takes extraordinary courage. My granddaughter's family is beyond honored to have a true hero joining our ranks today." My mother hurried over, her face a mask of nervous, eager smiles as she tried to salvage her standing with the bride's powerful family. "Oh, General," she gushed, laying a hand on Brandon's shoulder as he approached. "We are so proud of Claire, of course." And we're just so thrilled for Brandon to join your family firm. We know how competitive that vice presidency position was." General Pendleton chuckled, though his eyes remained sharp as he looked at Brandon. "Competitive? Madam, let's be frank. Your son is qualified, but there were dozens of candidates with his credentials. Do you want to know why I personally approved his hiring?" Brandon blinked, caught off guard. "Sir, when I reviewed your file," the general said, glancing back at me, "I saw that your sister was Captain Claire Vance. I know the discipline, honor, and character that runs in the blood of Marines who earn the Silver Star. I hired you because I trusted the family that raised a hero like her." The air left the room. My mother's smile froze completely, and Brandon's face flushed bright red with embarrassment. The very military career they had tried to hide, the service they had deemed unrefined and embarrassing, was the sole reason my brother had secured his dream career. The irony was absolute, leaving my family standing in humiliated silence before the entire room. Later that evening, after the applause died down and the reception was in full swing, my parents and Brandon approached me away from the crowd. For the first time in my life, my father couldn't look me directly in the eye. "Claire," my mother began, her voice small and trembling, stripped of all her usual condescension. We had no idea. We're so sorry for how we treated you." Brandon looked down at his shoes, scratching the back of his neck. "Sis, I had no clue my job was tied to your service. I'm sorry for letting Mom and Dad push you around." I looked at the three of them, the family I had spent my entire life trying to impress. I felt no anger, only a quiet, resolute sense of clarity. "I accept your apology," I said calmly, standing tall in my dress blues. "But I didn't wear this uniform to prove anything to you. I wore it because I'm proud of who I am and what I've survived. My worth isn't something you get to decide." I politely excused myself, raised my glass to General Pendleton across the room, and walked out of the ballroom into the cool evening air with my head held high. For the first time, I wasn't searching for their approval. I had my own. "Would you have worn your uniform despite your family's demands? Tell me your thoughts in the comments."